Today I speak with Sid Warrior. He is a doctor, neurologist, and a YouTuber. He has pioneered the conversation on neurology in India and he has made such a complex science accessible to everyone through his YouTube videos and podcasts. It was a super enriching chat where we spoke about the circadian rhythm and how we can change ours if we really want to. I asked Sid about how we loosely use mental conditions as tags with half knowledge, listening to know what he had to say about that. We also chatted about the role of psychedelics in exploring newer dimensions of our mind and do they really help? I loved his insights on how seeing death has helped him live differently. And lastly, his views on LLM and AI. This is one of those episodes where I wished I could have chatted more, but alas, all good things have to come to an end. So go over, enjoy the episode, and keep meditating.
All right.
So, hey, Sid, thanks so much for coming on Pragyaan. I know we've been talking about this for a while. So, finally, good to have you on the show.
Thank you, Pragya. Pleasure to be here.
Fantastic. I'm not a morning person, so I'm going to jump right in and talk about how circadian rhythms play an important role in us just being edgy and being sharp in our minds, right? So I'm a more of a night person, and I'm really
Mhm.
sort of curious about do circadian rhythms and the impact that it has on our mind and how we show up every day. Does it really have a strong connection, or it's just really a myth where people say, oh, I just perform better at night, and that's only because they have given told themselves that story, or it's actually true?
No, the story is true. When you tell yourself a story, that is what truth actually means. I love the classification of night owls and morning larks. I think that's what it's called.
Yes.
Some people are morning larks, some people are night owls. Absolutely, what your brain has been trained to do, what you've been used to doing from childhood. It's not at all that if you are one type of person, you can't become the other. But then it takes effort. So I have been a night owl for pretty much the first 30 years of my life. And in the last three, I have changed. So now I've started sleeping at 12, 11, sometimes on a very good day, 10:30. And I automatically wake up at 6:37 now every day, which for the
Really?
first, yeah, for the first 30 years, that was unheard of. हो ही नहीं सकता. Like my normal sleep time was 4 a.m. and I would wake up at 9 or 9:30. So
Yeah.
that shift can happen. It's not that it can't. It's just that you need to know exactly why you want to make that shift. And what happened with me was that there has been enough research now to show that it is better for your health to not stay up late. Now, we are not talking of productivity. We're not talking of, attention spans. We're just talking of your
Yeah.
general health.
Hmm.
It is not that great for you to be staying up when the sun is down. So just reading about that made me think, wait, do I really need to stay up till 4 a.m.? And it turns out that most of my 4 a.m. time was just spent chatting with people, friends, catching up, friends in the US. It's just easy for them. So then I thought, maybe for my own health, let's make that shift. So that made it easy for me.
So you're basically saying that once you understood the why and that the health benefit that comes with waking up earlier, you were
Yeah.
able to then train yourself over a period of time to become a morning person vis-a-vis a night person. But
Yeah.
you talk about something very interesting where more often than not, we know the why, we also know that it's important for us, and yet we're not able to change those patterns in our lives, whether that comes to habits or whether that's coming to even the food we eat,
Yeah.
or just simple things like gratification where we want that dopamine hit very quickly, and so I want to eat that packet of chips that's lying in front of me, vis-a-vis take those four steps or think about what am I doing and what am I putting in my body. So
Right.
tell me a little bit more about how do we bridge that. Do you have how do we bridge that gap from knowing to doing, right? It's a
Yeah.
big for many people it's a big chasm, and how do you fill that?
Yeah. So I have a theory that there are several drivers of action. Okay. So when somebody does something, there are several things that would have motivated that person to do that action. One is self choice, saying, I want to do this. Like, I want to lose weight or I want to wake up early. But that in itself is not enough. So there are other drivers for action. One is fear. What will happen if I don't? Which is why, like, I
Yes.
think most people pay taxes. Nobody wants to pay taxes. But then what happens if you don't? So that fear is a big motivation, right?
Sure.
The other thing is social commitment. So what if society were to judge? So that kind of keeping in tune with social obligation is a big motivator. The other thing is community building. Now, the way I switched from nighttime to morning time was that when I was in Lucknow, I found a couple of friends who like to play tennis. But Lucknow gets really hot in the afternoon. So the only time we could play is early morning. So we would wake up at 6 just so that we could play tennis. And because there were two other people and they would be waiting below in the car and honking the car, like, where are you? So very quickly you switch your timings. And it's so much easier to do something when there are other people involved. So
Sure.
one of the things that I always suggest to people who want to build a new habit is be unashamedly asking people to join you.
Hmm.
Just get more people, build a community. The more people are involved, the easier it will be for you to do it. It's
Yeah.
being better is not a one person job. I think it
Yeah.
takes a community to be better.
For sure, I completely agree. And, I think I've quoted this before where I love Naval's line, right, about how life is a single player game. And I always feel that it's great to think of it like that, but it's great to also have cheerleaders around you, right? Whether that is to build accountability or whether that is to encourage you in those moments when you are down. Or
Yeah.
sometimes, no matter how intrinsically motivated we might be, we do need some external validation to say, hey, we know what you're doing is good. And I love what you said about tennis because I tend to do that a lot as well, right? Where I struggle to be a morning person, but when I want to make that transition, I fix early morning golf games because we have the same challenge where it gets really hot. So you wake up at 5 o'clock, we tee off by 5:15, 5:20, and
Wow.
you're out of the golf course by 7:30. Playing 9 holes, and you're off the golf course, or whether that's even around running. So I agree. I think the community helps you build that accountability in changing that habit. And I
Right.
think, therefore, even announcing your goals, I think, helps a lot. Very often people say, oh, you should keep your goals to yourself. I agree. I think sometimes the reasons behind it can be kept close to your heart, but I feel sometimes making that announcement is like a social commitment where people outside of you keep you honest and keep you accountable. uh,
Right.
you know क्या हुआ 10 किलो लूज करना था, you're the same weight as you were on 1st Jan, what happened about that? Or even a new skill, right? So
Mm.
I completely agree with you. I think one other thing I want to also talk about is how, when people are not able to keep to that social commitment, especially when it comes to, let's say we were just talking about losing weight. And I have seen many people, because of those reasons, because of the way they look, very quickly go into depression or self
Mm.
shaming, or, just not wanting to go out and build a social life because they don't like the way they look,
Mm.
or they don't feel comfortable in their own skin.
Mm.
And, how do you feel? Or what do you think are ways to get out of that? Because it's like a rabbit hole, right? Once you don't like the way you look, you stop going out, you eat a lot more, and
Yeah.
you become even fatter. So you're not getting thinner, you're not getting better. And I'm just using physicality as an example because it's easy to see. We have the same challenges mentally as well. So, have you sort of seen or come up with any tips that you think that can help people get out of that rabbit hole in those moments?
Mm. No, this is a difficult spiral to come out of, because in general, eating can be a stress response. In response to any stress, it could be exam stress, it could
Yeah.
be relationship stress. That's like it's almost like a cliche that if you have a breakup, then you sit with a huge tub of ice cream because you want to deal with that.
Yeah. And
Because
Hollywood validates that for you, right? Makes it all right.
absolutely. It's almost like a cool thing to do. When you watch Friends, they have low fat ice cream for the, mild breakups and the really fatty ones for the serious ones. So we grow up with those concepts. And in general, people who will associate eating with comfort will
Hmm.
gravitate towards that no matter what they're chasing comfort for. So that pattern has to be understood. It's not wrong or right, but then if it is something that is bothering you or causing you physical problems, we have to diagnose it. So coming from a medical background, I don't generally spend too much time thinking about the ethics or the morality of why is somebody doing this. For me, everything is a problem that has to be diagnosed and then
Hmm.
it should be solved, including emotions, including emotional eating. All of these are part of these networks that we have formed. These are these learned patterns that we have, collected over the years. Doesn't mean
True.
it can't be changed. The process is still early diagnosis and proper treatment. All of this can be solved. But the problem is
Yeah.
that we don't diagnose it. We don't go for help. We don't seek help. We think that nahi,
Yeah.
there's nothing wrong with me. And if you're doing that, then it's very difficult to help somebody. We can't help
Yeah.
somebody who's not coming to the OPD. We can't go to their houses and help them. That never works.
Very true. But then how do those people shake themselves out of this, right? Because others around you can see that you're going down a spiral. I'll just give you an example. I was telling you I was at home over the weekend. I was in Jaipur, and I met this young guy, out of IIT Bombay, really smart, just happened to lose his job. And for the last 1 month, all he's been doing is he's just locked himself at home, and he's not going out because he's feeling a lot of shame in sharing that I don't have a job, because that's something that he identifies himself with, that having a job equals success.
Right.
And so, it's like young guy, 24-year-old, doing nothing but just sleeping and wasting his time, not because, and I'm saying sleeping is a great thing, I'm not equating sleeping with wasting time, but in his case it's almost as if he's getting into a depression, and he does not know how to get out of it, and yet
Yeah.
he doesn't want to go get help. So
Right.
and his parents are worried, everyone's worried, but yet, like you rightly pointed out, unless he doesn't feel it, he's not going to step out. How can those people, sort of listening to this or knowing that they need to get help but are not getting help, how do they make that leap?
Hmm. This is unfortunate because the truth is that we are not trained for this.
Hmm.
And that is a big problem. We should be trained how to deal with failure because for me, it is inevitable. At some
True.
point, you are going to try something that will not work out exactly the way you wanted it, right? It is going to happen either at work or in relationships or in your personal health, something, somewhere, you will attempt something that will not go your way because
True.
that's part of how life works.
And
But
it's more likely that that'll happen than success will show up on your doorstep. So, yeah.
correct. Yeah, absolutely. And if you go through that failure and you figure out that, okay, this is what I did, this is what went wrong, this is what I should have done. And instead of taking the path to regret, you take the path towards learning that this is what I should have done doesn't mean that my life is now over. This is what I should have done means now I have understood something new about myself so that the next time something like this happens, I will be different. Now, what happens is that we are not trained to think like this. So we are trained to think in absolutes. So if I failed, that means I am a failure. That means my identity is a failure and identity doesn't change. It's like a name. So we start identifying as that and then we are stuck.
So true.
This is where the problem is. We should be training children from school how to deal with this emotional upheavals because it is inevitable. Every single person, you, me, everyone has to go through emotional upheavals. Those emotional upheavals could be sadness, it could be anger, it could be jealousy, it could be annoyance. So all of these emotions will come in our lives. It's not a surprise. It's not like this, oh my God, I am sad. What is wrong with me? No, it's a normal part of human experience. But somehow we are brought up with this idea that we have to be happy all the time, we have to be successful all the time, and that is a ridiculous concept, right?
Yeah.
So we are not trained for it. What should be done is to have these kind of conversations right from the school level. Prepare kids that listen, you're going to give exams, you will pass, some of you will fail. This is, part of what life is about. And these are the steps that you have to take. And we have to normalize seeking for help.
Yeah.
The ridiculous thing is, in every other aspect of life, we don't even think about it. Your car
So
breaks
true.
down, you don't even think, ki, Acha, let me try and fix it myself. You don't even think. We're directly on, helplines. Okay, pick up my car, go fix it. I want it delivered tomorrow, whatever. We're fully in control. But when it comes to mental
Yeah.
health, we think, nahi, मैं खुद से करूंगा. I will do everything by myself. And nothing wrong with that. Just like nothing wrong in fixing your car by yourself. Great if you want to learn it. But when your car is on fire, that is not the time to start learning on how to fix your car.
Google how to fix your car. Boom, the car is
No,
gone.
exactly. No, no, no. That is not the time. That's why I
Yeah.
always believe that mental health conversation should happen when you're healthy.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen. We will only think of health when things go wrong.
When you're shoved against the corner and you don't know what to do, is when you go out and start thinking about what could I have done differently.
Correct. And then this is the first time that you're thinking of mental health. Of course, you will not know how to deal with it. You don't have the resources. And there are resources. There's an entire field called cognitive behavioral therapy, which essentially is empowering you to have the resources to deal with these problems, like
Right.
anxiety, like sadness, like depressive episodes. So it's a full thing. You have to learn it like any other skill, like juggling,
Yeah.
like cycling, like swimming. You have to learn it. If you don't learn, and then when you find yourself in the ocean and you can't swim, I mean, you will have trouble, right? So it's not
True.
it's not that complicated. So we have to empower people. We should give people the tools to deal with mental health issues, because it is not even, I don't even think it is a will it happen. Mental
It's
health
about
issues,
when.
when, absolutely, right? And the more people who are trained to deal with this, the less the chances are that that mental health issue will become a disorder.
Sure.
Because now we know, right? Just
And
like
you're able to
how,
nip it in the bud and address it when it's just evolving.
exactly. So why do we require people to have licenses before they can drive?
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that there will not be accidents, but imagine if anyone can just buy a car and start driving. There'll be a lot more accidents.
True.
That is my point. So the more we train people, it's not that there will not be any mental health problems, but the chances reduce because now people have the basic skills to deal with it. That is where the shift should
Sure.
happen.
And tell me, what are some of these resources? You spoke about, the cognitive, mental skills that we can learn, but are there two or three things that you feel people can quickly go on to learn a little bit better so that when they get that sort of trailer of what this could look like, it interests them and then they go out and actually get the help that they need? So, is there something on top of your head that you have that you can share that can help people get on that path a little bit?
Sure. There are two things. One is documentation. So, whatever it is that you're going through, it is important for you to document it, because when you're going through it, you are going through it in an emotional way.
Yeah.
And you will learn things from that event in an emotional way. You will take emotional lessons from it. And
True.
emotional lessons, while they're important, may not be accurate. So if you have a breakup, the emotional lesson might be that दिल्ली वाली लड़की के साथ मुझे कभी डेट पे नहीं जाना है, because they are all heartbreakers. Now this is an emotional lesson. Okay,
Yeah.
not based on true events. I'm just giving you an example that
Sure.
this is a emotional lesson that people might take home. This is why I am heartbroken. But
Sure.
later on, logically, if you think about it, you might take different lessons. You might take lessons like, maybe I should have communicated in a different way. Maybe I should have set my expectations differently. Whatever it is. So those lessons will only come later, and they will not come unless you document things properly. And that is where journaling comes in.
I
This
agree
is
with
a
you completely.
Yeah, this is a key thing. And how you journal is individual. Some people prefer to write, some people prefer to leave voice notes, some people prefer to maybe write poems. I mean, however, you can
Yeah.
use art to document your pain, your suffering, your experiences, your joy, but document. Find some way to document it so that you can come back and reflect on it later. Because that's
Makes
how
sense.
learning happens. You don't learn in real time. You often learn when you reflect on things. and people
Sure.
don't reflect on things anymore. We are too, because of social media and the pace at which life is going, we are actually too in the moment. We don't really reflect on things. So that is one. The other skill that we have to learn is emotional regulation.
Hmm.
It's very, very important that we do not become like slaves to our emotional swings.
Yeah.
That's a problem. So if you are upset, then everything crashes. If you're happy, then everything is good. So we tend to swing between these extremes without being able to regulate ourselves. And
Sure.
this is a skill, just like any other skill. We have to learn that, okay, too happy, okay, kind of bring it down. Too sad, no. Understand that these things will pass. So that kind of narrative, this adjusting between the two extremes. If you're very jealous, understand that, okay, maybe this is my issue. I can't really control somebody else's actions. Like these kind of narratives in your head is very important. And you have to keep doing that. And with
I
practice,
agree.
you get better and better. And
Yeah.
overall, your mental health improves because now you have found stability.
And
So these are,
balance.
and balance, yes. So these are
Yeah.
skills that you learn and it will take time. But once you learn it, your whole life becomes better after that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up about learning these skills in when you're in school and college, right? Because I think we're talking about these issues when we are in our 30s or when we are in our late 20s, and I wish that some of these skills were given to me when I was growing up, because it just makes you better prepared for adult life, because adulting is difficult. And that also brings me to, if you go back to tribal times, right? I've seen a bunch of documentaries, or we've heard stories about when you wanted to, when a boy in a community now was to be pronounced as a man, you either had to fight something, or had to fight another boy, or you had to fight an animal, or you had to take some test in order to really embrace that adulthood.
Right.
And whether you was successful at it or not, but every time I've read or seen those stories, it made me realize that those are very important learnings, because it allowed you to, like you said, deal with failure. Number
Yeah.
one. Number two, prepare for a very important test, because the whole community is looking at you, right? So it helped you learn how to prepare. And the most important is, you really in those moments looked inward and realized, what are my strengths? What am I good at, and what is it that I need to work on? There is nothing like that in our new age world, right? Where suddenly you're a boy or you're a girl, and then suddenly you finish college and you're out in the world just adulting automatically, right? And is there, of course, I'm not saying we need to go back to those tribal times, but I'm saying that what are some of those things that we can do to really do that introspection, because there's no external factors now which are pushing us in that direction.
Mm.
So can we create those for ourselves in some way? So for example, I try and put myself into some challenges where I'm constantly pushing my limits, right? Like going and learning a new skill or doing something new where I'm pushing my boundary, and doing that internal check of, am I keeping myself sharp or not?
Yeah.
So is there anything that you feel folks in their college can do to prepare themselves better for adulting, in addition to, of course, journaling and this inner awareness? But is there anything else that you feel that can help them?
So there are a couple of interesting thoughts that I have based on what you said. In the tribal times, the challenge was very well defined. So
True.
that was the advantage, that it was very well defined. You know that you have to say fight a bull, or you have to fight this particular person, and then you know exactly what you have to do. You have to prepare. You know the kind of skill sets you need to develop in order to survive. So those things are very well defined. In today's time, it's not that there is no challenge. Clearly, there is a challenge because
Sure.
people are suffering. So clearly, there is a challenge. It's just that it is not well defined. What
Yeah.
is the challenge? What is the challenge that today's 18-year-old faces? It's very hazy. It's almost like the challenges of identity. They have to find out who are they and what do they want to do? What is their passion? That is the
So
challenge,
true.
right?
Yeah.
So it's not that there is no challenge, because it is not possible for a society to have no challenges for the young ones. The way that society works is that young people have to go through some kind of difficulty in order to learn certain skills, because that's the only way they will be useful to society.
Yes. Yes. And themselves also, no? Adding
Of
value
course,
externally and internally.
if they don't add value to society, why would society value them?
Yeah.
It is a very, very basic give and take, right? Not everybody can be a dependent, because then who's providing? Somebody has to do something to create
Yeah.
something, right? To create something of value. So
Yeah.
that cannot change. That fundamental aspect cannot change. Not everybody can be a dependent. Somebody has to work to create some things of value, right?
So true.
So that basic transformation from an infant into somebody capable of creating value, that is what the adulting journey is, according to me,
True.
right?
I agree.
Now, what happens in the tribal times is that the things that were of value were actually quite limited. It is speed, strength, ability to hunt, ability to protect your family, and ability to maintain your family. As a woman, as a man, there were certain roles that were very well defined, and so what gave value was very clear. In
Yeah, so
Yeah,
true. I mean, you're talking about like the lower end of the Maslow's hierarchy, right? Where you were just
correct.
sticking to the physicality, and now we're in this upper end where we're only thinking about self-actualization. But I'll let you carry on. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. So now in today's society, what gives value? It's not a very clear cut answer, because there are many things of value in today's time. Somebody could be singing well, somebody could be a good artist, somebody could be a good coder, somebody could be just be a good speaker,
yeah,
somebody could be a motivational speaker. Their main value is to motivate other people to find value, and that in itself is valuable. So
very
there is
true.
a lot of things of value today. So the challenge in today's time is actually to find out how are you able to give value to society.
True, true.
And yeah, so that is the main journey that kids of today are going through.
I completely agree. And figuring out what that looks like can be very, very difficult, and also it can be very confusing. So I think you spoke about this, and that's very interesting. I think the other thing I really want to talk about, which I have heard you talk quite a bit about, is just neuroplasticity, and I think that's a skill that I have also been introduced to more recently. I meditate, I do heartfulness meditation, and in that we have developed a program called Brighter Minds, and it's
Mm,
exactly for this, which is how do you build neuroplasticity in young kids, because to a very large extent the connections between the left and the right brain, so to say, get fairly well embedded until you're about 20, 21. I mean, that number is different,
mm,
and I'd love to get your sense on what that number is. But therefore it becomes important that you're able to at an early age build as many connections as you can, because then that serves you in your adult life. um, I want to understand from you, like someone like me now, it's an old dog which can't learn many new tricks. So how do we keep making sure that we are being fit even in our adulthood, continuing to build those newer connections and making our minds, not allowing our minds to be in those older patterns, but building newer ones as well.
yeah. Your example kind of refutes itself, because you have started a new podcast very recently, and that's a big change for you. So clearly that's not true. Clearly a brain can learn new things at pretty much any age. I believe the fundamental metric for figuring out if you will keep learning is your comfort with discomfort.
Hmm.
That is the
So true.
single metric. If you are comfortable with being a little uncomfortable, you will keep learning for the rest of your life. The reason that people stop learning is because they value comfort too much. So they feel that, acha, I am comfortable in this space. And so, because I value comfort so much and I hate being uncomfortable, I don't need to step out.
Yeah.
And there are people like this, and there are people who find sustained comfort a little boring or a little upsetting, they get
Yeah.
restless. And those people instinctively know who they are. They know this. They may not have admitted this to themselves, but they know that there is a restlessness that comes in them as soon as things are too comfortable. And they will find that they will step out to explore.
Yeah.
How they explore is very subjective. They could be exploring with new books. They could be exploring with new podcasts. They'll be exploring with new friendships, new places to travel, trying out new things, joining a new startup, whatever. But that
Yeah.
urge to explore is very strong in some people and less strong in others.
Sure.
So that is how you know that your brain wants to learn more and more things.
Tell me, when is the last time you made yourself uncomfortable and what did you do?
So look at it this way. I spent almost 15, 16 years trying to be a doctor, studying to be a doctor. And over the last few months to years, to 2 years, I have started an Instagram channel, a YouTube channel. I've started a podcast. I have learned about lights, about cameras, about what microphones to use. And I remember 2 years ago, I was wondering what the hell is a Zoom connection? What is this thing, and how do I? So my first ever Zoom class, which happened during the first pandemic, I didn't realize that you can have a waiting room and you can lock it. So I had an open Zoom channel. I
Yeah.
shared the link on Twitter, of all places. You can imagine what happened on that.
Oh my God, a
Yeah,
massive mess.
it was a massacre. It was an absolute massacre. And so my learning started from there. And now I feel so much at home with
Yeah.
all of this setup. I'm sitting in my own studio currently, and I'm figuring out how what is the best camera setup for a three camera, four-person podcast. And so these are conversations that I'm really excited to have. But I know that
Sure.
very few other doctors would be having these, but they would be learning in different ways. They
True.
would be learning, they might be going for a fellowship, they might be learning new techniques. So that's all okay. Everybody can learn in their own way. This is my way. This is the path that I
Yeah.
have taken. So I find discomfort very exciting.
Yeah. Sounds
It's
familiar.
yeah. For me, I feel like if you're not learning something new, then what are you even doing?
Yeah, like they say, even stagnant water stinks, right? So you better keep moving, otherwise,
Yeah,
it's
keep
it's no
flowing.
good. Yeah, absolutely. Tell me something. I find that when it comes to normal, regular medicine and diagnosis, the minute you go to a doctor and you tell them you have a problem, the first thing they do is give you 10 tests that you should go so that they can validate it with those tests.
Mhm.
But if I go with a mental challenge to a therapist or a psychiatrist, I have never seen somebody say, can you go get this brain test done to see at what points is your brain lighting up or what is really going on? Is there a chemical imbalance?
Yeah,
And I'm hearing a lot more about that happening in more developed countries, but I'm still not seeing that in India that much.
yeah,
And since you are in this space, I'd love to know, why are we not building those bridges and making those stronger in terms of what we're seeing? And then what are we recommending in terms of solutions?
right. We have to understand this from the larger context of the history of medicine. Because imagine when cardiology was developed
Hmm.
and how long it took for cardiology to be the developed field it is today. When somebody got a heart attack, very, very early on, they didn't even know that it is possible for the heart to stop.
Yeah,
That, a heart to stop beating because there was a small blood clot inside the heart. Now that took time. And then we developed the ECG, then we developed a CT scan, we developed ways of imaging the heart, and then we developed ways of putting a putting a stent into the heart. And so slowly, slowly it got developed.
sure.
Mental health as a field has been a very, very recent one. So even the connection between psychology and neuroscience has been incredibly recent. I'm saying as recent as 40 years, 30 years,
Wow.
right?
Yeah,
We got an MRI 40 years ago. We didn't have the capacity to look at the brain in such clarity till very, very recently. Before that, in order to see the brain, we have to cut the brain open. So that is how recent this field is as compared to all other fields.
Sure.
That is the first challenge. The second challenge is that we are still understanding the biochemistry of emotion. We still don't know.
Hmm.
So we still, what happens is that there is so much overlap between different states because there is so much interconnectivity in the brain. So when you're
Sure.
in love and your brain lights up certain parts, it's very possible that similar places could light up if you're very angry at someone, because it's a surge of emotion and a lot of the same chemicals will rise. You'll get an adrenaline
Interesting.
surge. Your sympathetic activity will go up. So a lot of the same places will light up, but the context is different.
Of
Which is,
course.
yeah, so which is why mental health is difficult to correlate exactly with radiology, because we still don't understand exactly what all networks will light up when. So
I
it's an
understand.
evolving science. The challenge today is that if you prematurely start recommending functional MRIs or PET scans in these patients, there will be
Hmm.
a huge number of misdiagnoses.
Yeah.
And we don't want that. Things are complicated enough as it is. So currently, the best way to diagnose and treat is still through psychotherapy. So we
Got
diagnose
it.
with psychotherapy, we treat with psychotherapy. We do psychological assessments, we speak to patients, we understand their point of view, their mental status, and we treat also with that, with some help from medications. I have no doubt that in the next 20 years, this will change.
Hmm.
There
As
will
we're
be
learning more.
Correct. There will be techniques to, find out exactly what is going on. There is already methods to know if in depression, certain parts of your brain are shrinking or not. And with treatment, they have seen that the shrinking stops and the brain heals itself. So the parts of
Oh,
the brain that are responsible for paying attention and paying sustained focus, that area is actually shrinking. So somebody with depression is not able to pay attention. They think, oh, I'm so stupid. Why am I not able to do this? It's not your fault. That part of the brain
yeah.
is called dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, DLPFC. That area actually shrinks in depression. And with treatment, with behavioral therapy, with recovery, that place can actually recover and you're able to pay attention again.
Incredible. I'm glad you brought this up because this should act as an incentive for anyone who's feeling low to go out there and get help because, you'll just keep blaming yourself, not realizing it's actually not your fault. The mental state is not allowing you to be the best version of yourself.
Yeah.
And you're depressed and you'll just keep going down that loop. So, I'm
Mhm.
glad you shared that. But what I also want to understand is this you speak about diagnosis and in the millennial age that we are in where earlier we didn't talk about mental health at all,
Yeah.
and now we're talking so much about it, right? There's
Mhm.
this extreme, and I understand in most things that's how it functions, and at some point finds its middle and it's balanced, right? But what is happening currently is that very little information, or rather with a lot of information but very little wisdom around it or expertise around it, we tend to tag ourselves and then tell that narrative to ourselves. So for example, if I like certain things a particular way, I will start to call myself that I have OCD. I don't even know what it means, but
Yeah.
my friends will call me and I will call myself. Or if I shift topics often in a conversation because I'm a little
Mhm.
bit all over the place, I will automatically start calling myself ADHD, which is very
Mhm.
different from what ADHD looks like. So, can you help in sort of breaking some of these myths, and then also that if I'm feeling this about myself, what is a good time to go get help?
Mhm.
Maybe it's just a lot of it this is fluffy and I'm just taking myself too seriously, or
Yeah.
maybe I do really need help. So maybe some markers around that will be helpful.
So, my first point to this is that it's not people's fault for correlating these things, because there is no word for the normal kind of distractibility that a person feels. And because
Hmm.
of the word association, if you see somebody behaving like something, you will think of that word first, and that is the easiest association you can find. So,
True.
in a way, good that the awareness of these diseases is increasing, that people know what OCD, at least they have an idea that OCD looks something like this or ADHD
Yes.
looks something like this. And of course, they are not doctors, so they can't diagnose. The issue is that should they be using the word or not? So if somebody does want things in a very particular way, you can call them finicky, or you can call them, very
Particular about
likes
something.
particular about something. And that would be the probably like the correct way of dealing with it. But I think they go for words like this for its shock value or for the humor value of it,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
So that's probably where it comes from. I, for one, I'm not too judgy about this, as long as people who are actually in trouble get help.
Yeah.
So just calling somebody, suggesting that somebody might have something between friends is not like a crime, as long as, people who have a problem get help.
Yeah.
Now, what the real challenge for me is the availability bias of it.
Hmm.
You've seen this in COVID.
Yeah.
Everything is COVID. When COVID was happening, everything, every single thing
And
was COVID.
absolutely. And if you didn't have COVID, you weren't important enough, right? So,
So this is classic availability bias. If something is on people's minds, then everything gets attached to that. Now, that is an issue for me, because when kids are growing up with this awareness of mental health problems, they are not taught about mental health problems. They just hear about it. And
yeah.
so they don't understand the difference, because it takes a lot of nuance to understand that sadness is not depression.
So true.
Sadness is normal.
Yeah.
Everybody feels sad. Everybody feels anxious. People may also panic. Panic is also not abnormal. If there is a fire in my building, I will panic. I should panic. I better panic.
Yeah.
It's a normal response.
Yes.
But because we have these associations with these words, if I'm sad, that means I'm depressed. If I'm anxious, that means I have anxiety disorder. They can go around saying that, oh, listen, I have anxiety. And the issue for me is that once you kind of attach that to your identity,
Yeah.
it you get stuck in a weird loop. Because
True.
now, if somebody comes and says, you know what, maybe you don't have anxiety, you can take that personally. Like, you are attacking my identity now. Don't say I don't have anxiety, because they are attacking my identity. So then you get stuck. And the more you get stuck there, the harder it is to come out of it. So
Yeah.
there are two reasons why I feel that people should reach out for help.
Hmm.
One, if they are functionally affected.
Yeah.
If their job is suffering, the relationship is suffering, friendships are suffering, their physical health is suffering, just reach out for help. Just speak to a therapist.
Yeah.
Number two, if they have self-diagnosed.
Yeah.
If anybody listening to this podcast, if you have self-diagnosed yourself to have a mental health problem, please go check with a therapist. Because there is a chance that you might be doing yourself more harm by diagnosing yourself. Don't do that. There is a reason why there's an entire field that exists to diagnose and treat these problems. So just do that.
So true.
Don't
So true.
self-diagnose. Yeah.
Yeah. And don't just Google and then rile yourself up even more or create more fear, because that's half information and that's always going to get you in much more trouble. So if you're feeling anxious, you'll feel even more anxious, because you don't know what's going on with your body. I hope you enjoyed the first part of this conversation. Stay tuned for the next episode on Friday at 7 p.m., where we go deeper into the connection between neurology and activities you can do for your mental well being that include meditation.